Hello, welcome back to our second ever podcast, and I'm here with Tolly, who's 18 years old, and she's an inspiring entrepreneur and fashionista. So Tolly is also well known as Tolly Dolly Posh on Instagram, and she also has a sustainable fashion blog, tollydollyposhfashion.com. And it started back in 2012, and since then she's been featured by Instagram as a role model account because of her positive presence really making a difference for fashion and the environment. So Tolly, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got into it?
Yeah, okay, so I started it back in 2012, like you said, and it was sort of a summer project because my family are all very involved on the online world, and so I always had an interest, and I decided to sort of combine like my two loves of like tech and then fashion, and that's kind of how it started. It's out as like a very simple blog, kind of doing like collage with outfits and things, so very traditional blogging back then. And then kind of over the past 3 or 4 years it's become more directly about sustainable issues and kind of how we can change in our lives and in our wardrobes to have more positive impact on the world and the planet.
So if people aren't aware, like, do you know any facts and figures of how the fashion industry is damaging the environment?
So my initial knowledge of it came from the True Cost documentary, which you can watch on Netflix, and
so that's True Cost.
Yeah, and that was based around the Rana Plaza factory disaster, which happened in 2013, and it killed roughly 1,000 garment workers, and its main cause was because of the pressure of the fashion industry and the factory having orders, meaning that they couldn't stop even though there were warning signs about something bad happening. And so that's kind of where my knowledge of it came from. And there are statistics that fly around about the industry being like the second most unsustainable. Debatable how true that is, but it's definitely a big issue.
Just because of fast fashion and just all of this waste that... Where do you know where the waste goes? Does it go to landfill? Or?
Well, it really depends. So there's obviously the waste from like the garments being produced, and then there's waste of the clothes which aren't sold, which, you know, customers and what we have at home can go to landfill, but then you can have big companies who are burning and just incinerating clothes that they don't use.
So it's creating a lot of toxic fumes in the atmosphere.
Yeah, there are a whole host of issues, and it goes really far, and that's, you know, my interest in it has broadened and gone off in different directions.
Yeah. And so what is your sort of motivation? Why do you want to make a difference?
So after watching that documentary, it was kind of like a light bulb moment where I just knew I couldn't carry on, you know, writing and creating the same sort of content as I was before. I kind of understood that I had a platform that I needed to use, and so yeah, that's kind of why I did it, just knowing that I could do something positive when there are so many people who are just ignoring or just choosing to stay quiet about it.
Yeah. And so it's amazing, your platform. I absolutely love it, and those of you listening, go and check it out. Again, it's Tolly Dolly Posh on Instagram. And I just love the way you've set it out. It's really easy to use. It's really visual and aesthetically pleasing.
Thank
you. And it's just so cool to use social media as a young person to make a difference. And what would you say your tips for having such a professional Instagram account? Because it's very unusual to get, you know, scouted out by Instagram, and you've worked with lots of big corporations. So
yeah, well, I think just kind of I use my Instagram platform, I guess, in a very professional way. Like, I don't get too personal with it, and the photos I use, I kind of curate and make sure they match. So just really thinking about it and considering everything you're posting, that makes a big difference. And in a way, like, you're creating a brand, so just stick with that, and that's what will make it stronger.
So do you write down like ideas of how you want your brand to be?
I have in the past, like, I've made like mood boards and things that have helped. With Instagram specifically, an app that I use is called, I don't actually know how to pronounce it, Unum, UNUMEM, and you can kind
Unum.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can like use it to like plan out your feed so you know what it's going to look like.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is helpful. And yeah, I think a good thing now with Instagram is the stories, so you can kind of be a bit more personal on that, or not worry so much about what it looks like, because unless you highlight it, it's going to be gone in 24 hours.
Yeah, so it's like the stories are a way for people to get to know you.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. And what are you currently doing with your business?
So one of the most recent things, like over the past year, has been doing animation and making GIFs, and that's how I found Robin and BLISS-ED, was from seeing them being used, and strangers and actually millions of people have now used them. In fact, billions, if I'm being precisely.
So if people don't know what GIFs are, like, I'm guessing young people listening to this
will,
so but
when you're on Instagram with Instagram stories now, you can add GIF stickers, like moving stickers, to your Instagram.
So they're like animations, they're little pieces of art, aren't they?
Yeah, and I do them so they're more kind of useful, they're not just decoration. So I have ones which are like organic stickers, so if you have an organic food item or clothing, you can mark it, and it's just a fun way of making things clearer. Lots of people use the eco-friendly one that I have, and when it was Earth Day, I put one up for Earth Day, and that people use them. And so yeah, it's actually really interesting to see what sorts of ones people are using.
So companies contact you and they commission you to make these GIFs?
Yeah, so I've started to do that. So I've worked with a couple of companies and clients, and most recently I worked with Giphy themselves. They're the platform that run the GIFs through Instagram, and they asked me to create some based on like inclusion and diversity. So yeah, I've got some of those up now.
And so do you draw them by hand and then kind of put them on a graphic software?
Yeah, it starts out with a very rough like doodle or a sketch, and then I just basically go straight into Illustrator, Adobe, and I use Photoshop. It's actually very simple, but depending on what I'm doing, it can take a lot of time, like fiddling about.
Yeah, and again, people can look at them by, if they just search on the GIF platform on Instagram, then your whole collection will come up.
Yeah, so you can either search at Tolly Dolly Posh, including the at is very important, or you can just type in eco, and mine or other people's will come up. But definitely when you're like searching for sustainable things, a lot of mine will appear, because that's what I do a lot of.
Yeah. And what would you say, just finishing off, as an entrepreneur and as a young person online, what are the challenges that you've had to overcome?
I think kind of just like when you're a young person, you can feel like you're not really understood, or like your opinion isn't taken as seriously as someone who's older. So I think just being very sure of yourself, and if you have an opinion or something, then just being very definitive about it. That can help people recognize your voice.
And do you ever have days when you're not feeling so sure of yourself or questioning what you're doing?
Definitely, especially with like environmental stuff. You can feel like you're not doing enough to like save the world, and you have to kind of remind yourself that me as a single person, I'm probably not going to save the world, but if I can get other people to think about it, maybe I'll help other people
as a collective. Raising awareness.
So kind of just take a step back,
and it's making
it's
it
not
like
my responsibility.
Your GIFs that you make, they're so cool as well, and that people just use them all the time, and just that subtle way of it's starting to become trendy now to care about the environment, which is not just some sort of weirdo hippie thing.
Yeah, that's why like the GIFs are fun, because they're a very small part of what I do, but it means it kind of becomes more of a mainstream thing.
And outside of social media, recently I saw you're at a conference with the V&A, weren't you?
Yeah, so that was it was actually with the Environmental Audit Committee from the UK Parliament, and it was a hearing at the V&A for their Sustainable Fashion Inquiry, which is looking into the UK's fashion industry and how it can become more sustainable, and seeing the issues that are there. And yes, it's very interesting, but also kind of terrifying to see, you know, what's being done wrong and how it's kind of just being.
But that must feel good as well, to have that support of other people.
Yeah.
And networking.
And hearing, you know, having like my thoughts about it kind of, you know, confirmed, and like other people agree with me.
So do you have, if anyone's sat there and they've got a bit of an entrepreneurial side to them, and they're wanting to start something, do you have any kind of advice of how to start off?
I think just do it.
Do it.
That's
don't wait for the most perfect time.
I mean, for example, with like my GIFs, I kind of it was a very spontaneous idea, and now I'm like collaborating with brands and doing things like that. And
just start somewhere and it will lead.
Yeah,
on.
Exactly. And I think sometimes the most spontaneous ideas can be the best.
Yes, that is such good advice. I think, as well, as a young person myself with business, sometimes you can just wait, and that, like what you were saying earlier, of not being sure of yourself, but it's like almost you have to pretend to be sure. Take that leap of courage. Fake it till you make it. Yeah, so for everyone out there, just have a go. And is there anyone that you kind of go to for a bit of support when you're feeling like you need like a mentor or something?
I mean, they're not like an official mentor, but there are definitely people. Like, I had a Skype call with someone in America recently. She's called Whitney. She works for Fashionista. She's very lovely. And we had a conversation for like an hour just talking about all of this stuff, and it made me feel a lot better, because it was like she just had like support to give, and like no judgment or anything.
Did you meet her online?
Yeah. So she's like talks about sustainable fashion with her job, and so that's kind of how we connected, and just making connections there that like that, and when you can kind of feel that it's a good connection, go with it.
Yeah.
Because and I want to meet her at some point, so things like that can be helpful.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. So that was part 1 of our podcast with Tolly, learning a little bit more about being a young entrepreneur and using social media to create a brand. And then in our second part of this podcast, we're going to be talking to Tolly again a little bit more about the sustainable and environmental reasons behind her work, and some big collaborations that she's done with the UN and the Lonely Whale. So thanks for listening, and join us for series 2.